Did I win? Who did I make lose?
I lost.
I hate you, Sarah.
Yeah, Sean is online and Adam is online.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this is ever hybrid panel and audience. So I'm going to ask at the outset for just a tiny bit of grace because it might get a little bumpy along the way. But the idea here is that we're going to have a great conversation and think about this stuff. It's going to be fun. And we've got coffee and cool people. And we've got Eric and the CTRL team making sure that our tech works. So we're all very excited. It is right now 9:30. So shall we start?
Yeah, we should.
Okay. So this is our title slide. Sean, move us on to the agenda. I'm gonna start with just a little bit too much dialogue from me about experiential learning at AU and why this is on today's docket. So bear with me through those slides. And then we're gonna meet our panel, half and half, online and in person, and learn about the incredible work they are doing on campus and how they make this work sustainable, right? And maybe sometimes the challenges with that. And hopefully one of those themes is that we're going to do more with more, right? I come from the nonprofit world where it was very common to be told to do more with less, and that's very fatiguing, yes? So when we talk about student leaders as one of the ways we do this work, that can be a way to sort of do a little bit more with more, right? So it's not always just on your shoulders to do this work, hopefully. And then we'll have a really great Q&A. Sound good? Okay. So next slide. First things, we got to have a shared definition, right? So this is a lot of text. Different institutions talk about experiential learning in different ways. TLDR, we are learning, doing, and reflecting, right? These are cycles. And that one of the other things I really want to highlight in the definition is this purposeful engagement. We are purposely engaging in a learning cycle of learn, do, reflect, right? Experiential learning might be incidental, right? We do something and we're like, whoa, that took me on a weird journey and I learned something from it. But in an educational context, as an institution, we are trying to be purposeful and deliberate. So this slide will be available online on the website as part of the stuff. We showed this definition last year, but hopefully we can start moving towards a shared understanding at AU across departments and disciplines of what we mean by experiential learning. So to sort of break that down a little bit, to think about what we're doing, a team of strategic implementation thinkers, right, have been helping us to break this down into a bit of a taxonomy. When we look at the experiential learning that already happens at AU, we see that it's happening in the classroom in curriculum-driven ways. We see students engaging in research. We see students doing service learning and taking on leadership. We have these global experiences, and that's not just study abroad, right? There are other ways in which students will maybe, again, attach to a class or through alternative breaks, use travel as a means of experiential learning. And then, of course, we have our rock stars in the Career Center who are helping our students think through how experiential learning or work that they do off campus can tie to the learning outcomes they have on campus, and that all of this feeds career readiness. These taxonomies are not meant to be silos, right? Service learning can be tied to the curriculum. Something you do for research will help you with career readiness, right? So these are not one-off labels, but it's just a way to help us think about what we're doing and quantify it. Okay, moving on. The landscape, oops, my slide is a bit behind me. Skip that one, it'll be online. Yes, so where AU fits into this conversation in the higher ed landscape, this could be its entire presentation, and so I was waffling around which slide to share here. So suffice it to say that when we have looked across experiential learning in higher ed, certain trends show up. We know that prospective students and their families want to see it, right? When they're touring campuses, when they're looking at websites, when they're picking where to apply, experiential learning is something they are looking for. We know that at a lot of institutions, it's not so much that they built an experiential learning program from the ground up, so much as they kind of looked out at what they were doing and said, hey, we've got a lot of experiential learning happening on our campus. Let's corral it in a meaningful way, right? And be deliberate in how we point to it and talk about it. And I think that's kind of where we are at AU, right? We know we're doing this. We know it's sort of scattered everywhere. So let's do some work to corral it and make sure that it's visible. And our peer institutions are maybe a touch ahead of us in terms of drawing those legitimate connections and articulating them for an external and internal audience. The slide I didn't share, but I'm going to kind of look at right now. There's a third-party sort of website called Forage, and I don't want to get deep in the weeds of whether or not we think they're legitimate or like everything they have to say, but because of this escalated sort of market-based interest in experiential learning, things like lists, rankings, right? Everybody wants to put together a list. So these lists are starting to pop up, right? People are ranking schools based on experiential learning. And in this example of Forage, some of our peer institutions, right, the ones we compete for students and do co-authorship with and all this stuff, Georgetown is number 3 on that list. Lehigh is 46 on that list. Hopkins is 29 on that list. We are not on that list. So whatever it is we know that we're doing, the outside world isn't seeing it right now. So that's part of why we are having these conversations now, why it's part of the ANFAIR agenda. This is the kind of thing the Board of Trustees is talking about and seeing and thinking about. So the current state of EL and what we're trying to do. So I see Jamie is in the room. Can Jamie wave? We're developing an EL inventory, right? Because we realize as much as we're batting around these conversations, internally, we don't even really have our arms around what we're doing. So this extraordinary list is being developed and sort of classified based on that chart, right? We're going to work towards our second experiential learning conference where we have the opportunity to sort of capture these stories from the student and faculty perspective and to lean into that reflect piece, right? Giving students more of that opportunity to reflect on their experiential learning. And like I said, the Academic Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees is talking about this and thinking about how their board leadership can help move this conversation forward. And some of the important next steps we want to try to do is to sort of capture these stories, maybe in a centralized website, through a social media marketing campaign, so that we start to tell the story that's already here, and then to build better offerings. So this is where really the faculty come in, right? We want more credit-bearing experiential learning opportunities. And then my addition to this slide, right? I kind of borrowed some of these slides from various conversations happening elsewhere. Oh, move on, Sean. Move it on. There we go. I added this last part without burning out the faculty, right? Because sometimes when we have these really exciting conversations at the strategic level, we know they're important to do and we get really excited about them, and we forget that actual humans with already full workload buckets have to carry it out, right? So we wanted to make one of the themes of the panel today, like what makes this work exciting, what makes it fulfilling, and how do you move it forward without just hitting a wall, right? So panel, be prepared. That's some of the questions coming your way. So with that, I'm about to shut up. I know you're relieved, so that we can meet the panel. So Sean Bates is assistant professor at SIS, what I left off this slide. He's also been very active in a number of living learning communities, the Washington Semester Program. I believe he is our faculty senate rep to that board committee on academic affairs. Sean, raise your hand so that you pop up. No? Okay. Sarah Minky-Fish is the assistant professor and assistant dean of experiential learning at SOC, right? So she does this in her classrooms. She thinks about it at a programmatic level. Her brain is full of wonderful information we should know. Jeff Middens, currently the interim faculty director of AU Honors, where we know that there is plenty of curriculum integrated experiential learning, and lots of, I'm sure I could go on about their bios. And then Adam Temashasky, who is currently our AU Core Faculty Director and her Senior Professional Lecturer in CAS and Writing Studies. So are you ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, and can I just say, because I don't want Martin Oliver to get nervous, I'm coming for him. Martin Oliver is the core faculty director. I am complex problems faculty director in University College.
Oh.
So lest Martin get nervous, I am not looking for his position.
He's not here right now.
That is my error.
Martin is everywhere.
All right, so questions. Next slide. Our opening question is, here we go. You each have a rich portfolio of experiential teaching, both in your own classrooms and as part of larger program or departmental goals and planning. Could you start by telling a little about the credit-bearing experiential learning work you lead and how incorporating EL into your teaching has impacted your workload? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. Is that fine?
Yes.
So as the faculty director of complex problems, experiential learning is integrated into our learning outcomes, into what we do. And so if you don't know much about complex problems, a very quick distillation is every CP seminar has a program leader, a sophomore through senior who's taken CP, that comes every class, and they work with professors to organize co-curriculars, experiential learning opportunities, and they often run it themselves and manage all the logistics of it. And for CP, this is part of the work that we see of getting students more sort of integrated into the world at large. They're moving from the sort of cocoon of high school into collegiate world, into the world beyond. And knowledge doesn't stop at the four walls, and it's more important than the four walls of a classroom. And so we work together, us and our student leaders, us faculty, to think about these opportunities that let students connect the principles, the ideas to the world beyond the classroom and get their hands into the world and then think about that world. One of our other learning outcomes, in addition to integrative learning, is reflection. And we want them to think about what they're doing, which, to go back to that previous slide, reflecting on the work is a key part of the work. It's not just sort of mindlessly go out and go to a museum and end of story. It's get out there, do the work, do the experiences, and then think about it, and kind of this recursive process. And then I'll shut up after this, addressing that last part about how's it impacted your workload. Just to say something about that earlier slide about burnout, I think you nailed it. This is an exciting thing. This is a thing that energizes my teaching, seeing how I can get them to go beyond the classroom. How can I get students to see that what we're talking about is going to impact their lives? And so it's made my workload more exciting. Having the student leader to help me organize and plan these and lead these events lightens that side of it. So it's been a gigantic boon to my own pedagogy and my own experience, frankly, in the classroom.
I'd like to jump in. Can I jump in next?
Yes, go.
All right, I'm gonna, in the School of Communication, we offer a course for first-year students called Visual Literacy, COM 105. And we, for years, have had an experiential component with that, which really culminates everything that the students have learned during the semester in visual design, graphics, filmmaking, photography. And they work with a nonprofit to help them with the visuals, short films, various things, their website. And Marcy Campos, if you do not know her and her office, Marcy's in the back, she helps our faculty many, many times in helping find the organizations that they're going to work with. And there's a community-based learning credit that students can get with that as well. So everybody in the world should know Marcy Campos and her office. They are phenomenal. I've worked with the National Park Service, the Embassy of Norway, the Smithsonian, the Earth Conservation Corps, Sudden Cardiac Arrest Association. And what I love about doing this work with the students is 20% of their grade at the end of the semester is this final culminating project where they're working with the client. And The students will often say, as first-year students, what do you want? It's like, it's not what I want. What does the client want? And you have got to listen to them, and you've got to figure out what do they want and what do they need, because they cannot necessarily articulate it visually with what they want to have happen in their social media, their website, their short films, the way that they're presenting their work to the world. And a lot of these places, everybody's heard of them, and they don't know. They have very small staffs and very limited and very little background in visual work and visual media. And so this gives the students a real client. And I tell the clients coming in, when we worked with them, with the Embassy of Norway, let's just take that as an example. I went in and met with them during the summertime. We were going to work on a project on the Arctic. They had something where they needed to communicate out to high school students about the importance of the Arctic regions. And there was going to be a film experience taking place for students to enter a competition. And so they needed everything built out for that. And so their requirements were to first come in and meet with the class, tell them who they were and what they were doing. Then we went to the embassy. We found out a little bit more. We met the ambassador. We met a variety of folks, and they learned that. And we came back then at the end of the semester with the final projects and the work that the students had done. And they made that presentation to the folks at the embassy, and they said, could you come back next week? The State Department's going to be here. And we want them to see this visual work, all this that you've done, because we've never found a way to be able to articulate the importance of the Arctic in such a manner. And so they did, and 3 of the students were offered internships with the State Department. And so as first-year students, it was really quite an extraordinary experience. So that gets to kind of why it's credit, but I'm thinking in terms of, for students, it's that enduring understanding. What is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, that they're going to look back at American University and the experiences that they had and say, wow, I remember that course, and I remember what I learned, and I remember how I applied it. Okay? It wasn't just learn it for the moment and be done with it and move on. I had to apply this in such a way, and I had to defend why I was making that color choice, why I was making that font choice, why we were doing everything we were doing, and connect it to that client or that organization. So for me, yeah, every faculty member, it's more work, but it is such lovely, wonderful work. It's just so joyful to see what the students do. And the clients, I do tell them that you need to be prepared that there may not be anything here that you're going to like. Okay? We're taking a risk. The students haven't learned any of this material yet. I have no idea where they're coming in from. They have no background knowledge, so this could be a complete fail in terms of materials that you're going to get to use. But on the other hand, you're going to get a chance to pick young people's brains and talk with them, and they're going to benefit. And so I try to take the pressure, off of me, okay? Because I don't want it to look like I failed. I think sometimes we as faculty members think it becomes our responsibility. It's our work, our name. And it's not. It's their work. It's their names. It's their experience and their work. And I'm just going to guide them along and ask them questions and have them have the experience. You're up.
Okay. I'm going to pivot off of both of the ones that have come before. And strangely, I'm going to start with a program that I'm not affiliated with, but it works very well with what Sarah's actually talking about. And I've been hearing enough because I go to have enough conversations with the folks at the Community-Based Research Scholars Program, I'm the interim faculty director of honors. The first year students in the honors programs are on the same hallway as the Community-Based Research Scholars Program, which we think is changing its name at some point. So don't keep that name in your head. There may be a new name coming, oriented around that. But much like how Sarah's actually described what's happening with visual literacy, students, first-year students who organize with that program are actually working with nonprofits. Their classes are, the program works a lot with Marcy's office, and is that whole program. It's a 1-year program that then sometimes leads to a certificate, but all of that is experiential. The first semester is a complex problems-oriented class that has this added working with nonprofit component, and then in the second semester, very similar to what Sarah's talking about, students actually work with nonprofits and then do some of the similar kinds of work for programs in the community around DC that they are actually, that need this particular kind of labor, and it gives the experience to the students. The students that come out of this program are like really excited about working with the community and get these fabulous experiences. I'm bringing it up at all because it's kind of the hidden program in some ways. How many of you know about CBRS? Yeah, there's not many around that actually know about this. And it's funny because it's something, it's like once students find out about it, once incoming students find out about it, the ones that are drawn to this program are really drawn to this program and they really get into it. So I'm throwing it out there because it's something that I think that isn't as well known.
The first year students are selected for it, and there's like 40 selected. But where's they apply? They apply, but you all select who's going to be in it. But there is a certificate, so even if you're not in the first year program, you can then take certain courses and get a certain number of credits and get a certificate. So it's not like you don't get in from the beginning out of the question.
See, this is the danger when it's not your program and you start talking about it.
So they can be majors all across
yes.
the university.
And are, yes, and they come from. And it is very coordinated with, in many ways, with honors. And so that's the one I will talk about more, which differs from many of the other programs in that it's a four, oh, there we go.
Getting creative.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
It's a 4-year program that actually, and there are components that are experiential that are happening at all levels with this. It starts with, and this is coming off of Adam's discussion of complex problems. What he's talking about, if you've taught complex problems before, you usually have these experiential I was about to say experiential experiences. Co-curricular activities.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, what's happening here?
Events. So that language trip up happens a lot.
You go out.
Stay in your lane, mittens.
There are usually 3 or 4 that happen throughout the semester. And part of the problem, for a regular complex problems class, is time. How do you as the professor work with time, but also how does you work time if you want to, say, take them out to to see a play or to go to a particular place? There's the time to get there, the time to come back. Everyone's got different schedules. What do you do with this? And that's both a problem, but you can do all sorts of interesting and creative stuff with that. For honors, we actually have something called an experiential lab that's actually attached to the complex problems course. Instead of 3 or 4, it happens every week. And so a block is actually added into their schedule. So this is a commitment, and it's one of the, and herein lies part of this. Faculty are compensated for the commitment. We work very closely with program leaders to build out that program, and they do a lot of the work of actually, coordinating where are we going to go. But we are part of that process, and part of it is to make sure also that these experiences do come back into the classroom. They're not just random things that we go to see. They are connected. I'll say it goes further than, I mean, this is part of like, let's talk about the whole honors curriculum, but in the second semester, faculty then, and Sean Bates is one of them, will lead, sort of lead folks down research. We orient a lot of our classwork around experiential research. And so in the second semester, faculty are guiding students into a particular research project that they start. They don't do the whole research project. They sort of lead them down the beginning of, this is how research might be done in this for this particular topic. In the second year, students are slowly led up to doing a research project on their own in small groups. It's a challenge course. Some of you may have been approached by students to actually help mentor them. Again, compensation is involved here, so this is part of this. It's like, if you are willing to give up your time, particularly nowadays, what does that mean? Sometimes that means money, and that money, time is a thing. I think that this then continues further. Obviously, we all have capstone. The capstone experience is something that's now a requirement for all students. The honors students in particular, actually, we just had in the fall, had them all come, because they're coming from all over the university. It's been exciting to see them then present their material to everyone else in a sort of research forum. But research, of course, comes in different ways. Research is often experiential. My first year experiential research experience, the spring one, actually involves subtitling. In my particular course, they have to find something that they want to that needs subtitles or needs new subtitles for some reason. They have to investigate why. But it's more than just working with someone with language. It's then sort of delving into, okay, why is this person in this particular film clip eating this particular thing? Is this something normal that is being... A very quick anecdote with this is that I watched an Icelandic film many, many years ago called Jar City, where a detective, picked up some food, came home, and just bit into a deep fried skull of an animal. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's, there was sort of revolting, atmosphere. And the director was there, I joked and was like, oh, that was really weird. And he just looked at me and was like, that's like Tuesday, that's fast food in Iceland. This is showing that he eats fast food, not that he's eating something, odd, and that he is odd in this way. And that particular, how do you deal with that with translations? That's something that you don't get from a book necessarily, but does involve research and does involve, in this case, actually, going out, finding people and finding about different elements of culture. So different types of experiences that are happening. The issue for us, again, it comes back to the time issue. It does take, we work very well with students, and students that then come back and contribute as program assistants at various different levels. I think we do that well, and we have students who are willing to do that. But sometimes that is an issue in terms of having faculty agree. It is more of your time. Like Sarah, there's Kool-Aid in here right now that that we have clearly drunk, that this is an exciting part of our teaching experience. It's one of the reasons why we do what we do. But it is a commitment. I'll stop there.
Sure. So before we move on, Sean, I know you've been dropping things in the chat. Do you want to unmute and say something in 1 minute?
What is he saying behind?
I don't know. I'm catching little blips of Sean's add-ons.
So yes, there are little blips. Sorry about the. I was actually trying to change your background there, since I'm supposedly screen sharing, but I've changed it 4 times and your image hasn't changed, so I'm not sure what's going on. Zoom, it's fun. I just want to so very quickly. I teach in the School of International Service. I previously taught in the Washington semester program. I have taught one of those complex problems for the honors course, which has the dedicated extra time for co-curriculars, and it is incredibly valuable to be able to have that dedicated time to do those co-curriculars. It is more work, but it is worth it. I have also taken students abroad, both for Washington semester and for the honors program and for other programs. And while it is a tremendous amount of work, traveling with students will give you a different perspective, and it absolutely gives them a different perspective. It is one of the most rewarding experiences of my professional career to be able to talk with someone about what it means to prosecute war crimes and then take them to what is now the residual mechanism for the International Criminal Tribunals. I have sat in on the trial of Charles Taylor. I have seen war criminals from Yugoslavia being prosecuted, and so have my students. It's not just a case that they read in a book. I have sat in the European Parliament with my students, and yes, they get some of that when they do study abroad. Quick plug for IAU's study abroad program because it is fantastic. But there is so much more we can do in our classrooms. When we talk about the experiential learning, one of the things that I'm going to be working on this semester is how I can get my intercultural communication class more engaged in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be asking them to go around and see the other neighborhoods of Washington. This is an incredibly diverse place, as you all know. And the ability to be able to not just go to the embassies, which is sort of what my international studies students often think of, but go down to Ward 5, go walk from AU to DuPont Circle. They understand the city so much better if we can get them out and about. I'm going to ask them to use some of the museums to craft their own. I have simple one-page assignments that I give them to take to both the Native American National Museum of American Indian and to the American History Museum. I'm now going to be asking them to come up with their own as a guide for future students to the African American History Museum, in part because I want them to go, and in part because I want them to engage it in a way that is different than me just saying, I want you to go look at these exhibits. I want them to do the same sort of thing that Sarah was talking about in terms of having a client, or that Jeff was speaking about in terms of really being able to engage with the material. Look at it not just as an observer, but how you would explain it and what would you select that would be important for a different observer. All of those are forms of experiential learning. We don't have to take them to Belgium. I highly recommend it. We have chocolate shops we can tell you about, but just out and about in the city, and the alternative breaks, the CBRS programs are really important. And Marcy, I know you're still there, so I'm going to keep plugging this. And the program is still up on the screen, despite my best efforts. But the ability of CBRS to connect you with community partners that we already have relationships with. Some of this can take some of that extra burden, and I'm not going to lie, it is an extra burden on the faculty to be able to come up with some of these things, but they are so much more rewarding and engaging that I think it's really worth it. I'm going to stop. That was my 10 minutes, right, Olivia?
I drafted about a dozen questions. We're not going to answer a dozen questions because you all have so much to share about every single one. So I'm going to skip through the slides that you're not seeing to one that I really, if we get to nothing else, let's do this. How do you recruit students for participation in experiential learning opportunities? I know you talked a little bit about these first year programs where students are raising their hands before they even get here and saying, I want to be in the honors program. I want to be in CBRS. So the kicker, how do we get students who might pass under the radar to engage these opportunities?
All right. First of all, I want to make sure that all faculty know that the students all have Metro passes, so that the transportation is free for them. All right, so that used to be a real concern, and thank goodness we have the one pass and they can use that. So that's a huge benefit. I run a New York career intensive and an LA intensive for undergraduate and graduate students. And for those kinds of programs, it's simply pushing out information through the Career Center, through their emails, putting up posters, advertising it, opening it up to all the students, going in classrooms, telling the students about a particular course and what's going to be taking place. And I've done that with other courses in cross-cultural filmmaking, where it's a course that is offered across the School of Communication, SIS, and CAS, and foreign language. And going in and talking with classes and students so that they know what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be traveling and working with international film teams in Mexico or wherever we're going to go and study monarch butterflies, whatever we're going to be doing. So there, I think you cannot underestimate getting into other professors' classrooms, sharing with your professor, other professors, what's going to be going on, and getting to the students to talk with them about it. And that is the way I at least get word out to students.
I want to put Adam on the spot for just a second because of the sort of duality of complex problems, opportunities that have already sort of been surfaced a little bit, that for some of these complex problems, there's that dedicated block of time to do the experiential learning. And then for other complex problems courses, there's a little bit more of this sort of model where you kind of have to nudge students outside of the class without that dedicated block. So I wonder if Adam could talk a little bit about what it means to encourage students who might be a little less self-motivated, self-starters, to engage the co-curriculars.
Yeah, actually, there's a couple things I want to wax philosophic on for a moment there, but to the concrete question, for CP, you know, that we cannot mandate the co-curricular. Students have lives, they have jobs, they have other classes. And so we're already encouraging faculty, make these opportunities available, but also be ready to work with the student to figure out if they can't, let's say, so if, I teach a class, the West Prom of Evil. Every semester, my students go to the Holocaust Museum. If they can't make the group trip, find out if they can make it on their own. And if circumstances are such that, let's say, they can't make it to the museum on their own, there's a virtual component you can do, right? And so there's ways of seeing, can I help a student get to the same pedagogical benefit through different routes, depending on what the student needs, where the student happens to be. So I think that's one way to think about it. If it's not a logistics issue, if it's more of a student's disposition, the willingness to believe experiential learning matters, and like any pedagogy, there is not one right thing for that works for every student. Knowing that I'm here to help students find their route to where I think is best for them. So if it's in the experiential learning direction, I think I can get most students to the same place at the same time. And the ones that I can't, how can I get them to that destination in a way that works for them? That's one way to think about it. I just want to piggyback on myself there to talk sort of the previous question. How, if a student, let's say, has gone past their first year, they've somehow tapped out their relegated experiential learning opportunities, what can faculty do to keep EL alive in front of them? And I think it's an awesome question that again, punts it to us, the faculty, to think about our pedagogy. How can I use experience to help a student learn what I think is important? And I have an example at the tip of my mind. I don't suppose Jessica Waters is in the room, is she?
She's not.
Okay, so I'll pass along as a good example. In complex problems, for instance, one of our learning outcomes is diverse perspectives, getting students to recognize there are other opinions besides their own. There are nuances to opinions, including their own. And how do we engage with these ideas in a way that encourages civility, critical thinking, and so on? I learned that Jessica Waters does this assignment in one of her courses on reproductive justice, where she has students craft surrogacy agreements. And each student gets assigned a particular participant in this agreement. The mother, and she'll use, say, for example, let's say two guys are going to use a surrogate to have a child. One of them will be the biological father. So one student will represent the biological father. One of them will represent the other father. One of them will represent the surrogate. They need to craft agreements for their own client. And then they need to come together and come to an agreement that all three parties sign off on. Giving and taking, compromising, holding fast to principles they think are essential. And if I'm trying to get a student to learn about diverse perspectives and how to work in complicated environments, that assignment is an awesome example of an experience that gets them to that in a way that any lecture could not come close to touching. So I would say for any faculty in the room who are interested in bringing experiential learning in, it can be, yes, leaving physically the four walls of the classroom, of the campus, but can also be, how do I bring experiences into the classroom and give students a chance to see those as routes to the same pedagogical destination?
That's super cool.
So I'll piggyback on a couple different things. First of all, I'm so happy that Sarah mentioned the One Pass. For those of you who are new, like this is probably like something, this is just a normal sort of thing. But for those of us who are ancient, this was a game changer for us when students were actually, that they could no longer say, I can't get to like location X. It allowed DC to open everything up. And I will say that we are out of practice with that now because the pandemic shut us all down. I know that I'm out of this. I had all these amazing experiences. I'm actually thinking in terms of another experience that Adam was actually talking about if you can't go on the group thing, to have students have an assignment that actually has them able to experience it in another way themselves. The Hirshhorn several years ago featured an interactive, this is for a introductory film class. So this is for the creative aesthetic habit of mind, where I had students at the Hirshhorn had a limited exhibit. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Manifesto, if anyone saw this one. And Kate Blanchett is in 15 coordinated short films playing different people, all reading manifestos through history, and they're all in the same sort of space. And part of the problem here is finding out about things that are happening because DC is constantly changing, particularly if you're looking in art for this. But the ability to then send the students, both bringing the students to this and then exploring the museum in general, and then sending them out, I think is a wonderful sort of opportunity that we have. This is what we have. I'm actually shocked that we're not on these lists.
I know, right?
It's weird, because that's sort of when we talk to students, and again, I've spent some portion of the last half a year talking to incoming students. I have a student applying to college now. This is actually something that comes up with us, so I'm a little surprised that no one else thinks about this with us. Two other things, though. I think to answer directly your question, how do we do this for not just particular students? I think it's peer pressure, which is to say that if we really want to do this, and so Adam's program, sorry to lay this on you, for a program that every single student has to go through, the fact that they're getting some experiential learning in all complex problems classes means that it's introduced at the first year or at an introductory level to incoming students. That's the spark that then perhaps the rest of us need to continue. And the idea that this is just part of our culture could be very enticing. That's why I say peer pressure. The students who are unwilling to do this, well, you'll be left out if you're the only one that isn't actually actively going and doing these things. I think that this could also be done with how we assess these particular experiences, because here's the other part of this. Quite frankly, our students, at least a good portion of our students, they're not going to do it if it's not for a grade, right? And the key there is to make it the assignment worth enough, and this is why I'm thinking about this manifesto assignment. Make it worth enough so that they really should do this. They're going to lose if it's worth 10-15% of their grade. That's a full grade down if you're not going to do it. So this is something I really should do. And if the grade needs to motivate them, then fine. And at the same time, make the grading of that actually, and you know where I'm going with this, Adam.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with this too, so you better buckle up.
No, but to actually make the grading something along the lines of labor-based grading, or something that's actually not as onerous, so that this is actually something that they can take a risk with, perhaps, because it is, something different, something new, and perhaps something that we, in terms of timing, in terms of making something sustainable for us, that we can comment on, but is not, the deal breaker for assessment on our end also.
Okay, Sean, I'm going to let you go first on the next question because we've got 5 minutes left, and I really want to ask this last question. I know you've got brilliant things to say, and I'm sorry. So, I don't know what face he's making at me. So this last question, I have a list of groups on campus: prospective students, current students, departmental leaders, university administration, and the board of trustees. From that list, pick someone you would address and tell them what you wish you could tell them about experiential learning at AU and what you need to make it successful. We could do the whole panel on this question, I know. Sean, I said you could go first.
Okay.
Yeah. Who are you gonna pick?
Okay, I'm gonna pick a board of trustees meeting at which we have both President Burwell and the deans.
Oh, so you're looping in 3 groups in one. Nice, nice.
That happens.
This is how we work the angles. You didn't limit me. And I'm gonna say, not only do we do this, we are very, very good at it. And we have people on campus already, and we have connections that can make this happen, but we do need resources to incentivize it and to support it. And things like the honors program having a dedicated time for their co-curriculars for their complex problems course is an amazing benefit and resource. And it made the things I wanted to do with my complex problems course possible. And some of that was an innovation of the AU Scholars Program, which Olivia Ivy used to manage and direct for us. And we came up with some really interesting models. The honors program, CBRS, the complex problems courses are all doing some really innovative things that we need to be able to push out to the rest of our faculty and to encourage them and make possible for them to engage in, because it does take a little bit more effort, but some of it is just knowing that it's possible and a little handholding. I would love to see potentially a, can I plug my own idea, Olivia?
Yeah, you're the panelist, yes. And you're talking to the board of trustees and university leaders, so go.
I have an idea that is germinating that I would love to engage with faculty across campus, where we say that we are dedicated to an anti-racism agenda and toward a vision of diversity and inclusion that includes everyone on our campus and in our campus community. As someone who has lived some of that, though I don't necessarily look the part, I would love an opportunity to coordinate an effort with faculty across campus that allowed us to bring together different disciplines and different courses to have components that express and engage with the history of structural racism in our country, that also include aspects of how it connects to the international. I would like to do that with an initial foray with a group of faculty traveling for a week through the Deep South as a preparatory moment to being able to take students on a trip through the Deep South that engages not just places like Selma, Montgomery, Birmingham, Mobile, Atlanta, and New Orleans, but also the history in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and Maryland, and the historic trails with Harriet Tubman and with Frederick Douglass, the rich history that we have here, all of which engages all of our disciplines and should be able to be achieved for a relatively low price, but would give various components to courses across campus. We could talk about literature. We could talk about some of this. Frankly, I know that some of the sciences sometimes feel left out. There is a fascinating thing being done around the archaeology of the Clotilda, which is the last known slave ship to come to the United States, but is currently buried in mud, and how you might preserve that. There's a really interesting science side to that, as well as archaeology, as well as socioeconomic things of all kinds. And for the international relations people among us, it was an international trade, and we need to talk about that.
Cool. So multidisciplinary and properly invested of time and resources and cross-disciplinary community.
To create a cross-campus whole of AU, one AU program that we can really engage our students in as well, to increase that conversation and really be able to engage them. I know it's something that we try with programs like AUX2, but this is an experiential model to hopefully further those conversations. I don't think you take people as a freshman, but maybe you take them at the end of their freshman year or the end of their sophomore year. But before that, I want to take a group of faculty on that trip so that they get the experience of the experiential learning.
Cool. All right, we are technically past time, so if you have to leave, respect that. But as somebody in the chat said, that is a spicy question, and I wonder if anybody else wants to jump in.
I will jump in quickly and say that part of what Sean is talking about is community. The one group that's missing from her thing is actually us as faculty.
Yes.
I think that part of this is actually like the idea of building together. This is something we're struggling with in the honors program. Is actually we've realized that several of these components, we know about them because we are like directing them, but people in the program don't necessarily talk to each other as much. And we'd like to do that more to actually form faculty community. I think is something that we should do. It will also help us de-silo from our individual programs. This is one of the reasons I am really enjoying being in honors right now, and getting outside of my own CAS literature bubble. Quite frankly, I love the folks in SOC, but SOC, I'm coming for you. Oftentimes is very, in particular, I would love to work with you guys more, and that opportunity is not there. Yeah. So to the administration and to Board of Trustees, allow us to get those deans in the room and say, look, we do need this kind of support.
Yeah, I would say to them, and this is the whole group again, I'd say, number one, you have no idea what's going on at AU. We've been doing experiential learning for decades, and you just need to get your act together and get it all recorded, okay? And find out what's happening everywhere and get it down so people know and everybody else in the faculty know who's doing what, so they could actually start to work together. And so I would like to get a faculty grant of $20,000 or $50,000 that we could pool together for experiential learning, and a faculty member could say, here's what I want to do, this is what I need to have for the money, this is what I'm going to do with these students, and then, okay, you need to record it, you need to know what's taking place, boom, you've got it, because you think it doesn't exist, and it does.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
Can I chime in with one last thing?
Do it.
Which is to say, I want to agree with I would pick faculty, and I want to push back on something Jeff said and inspire everybody, encourage people. If the only way you can get students to do your experiential learning, your co-curriculars, is by the external incentive of a grade, that is a pedagogical challenge for you to rethink what you're asking them to do. So I just want to resist that grades should be used as this lash to get them to do things. If a grade is all that you have, you don't have enough. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, it's true.
Can I just add, this is a from my office, and we run 5 different experiential learning programs. Alternative Break, where I think that civil rights trip would be fantastic, and all the community-based learning courses that do actually have some additional resources. So if you want to contact us, just grab a file. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Nice
All
to
right,
see you.
thanks online to you.
We need more flexibility in force office.